Hello, how are you? I hope you're well. I know people are stressed out right now, not only in the United States, but across the world. I hope you're hanging in there. There's lots to be stressed about. Post COVID blues continues. The dystopia expands, but hopefully I can provide some temporary relief to that with my ramblings and goofery when it comes to talking about music. And if not, if it doesn't help, then whatever. I try my best. What do you want from me? But I hope you're hanging in there. It's a strange world right now. Just bizarre and depressing and odd and strange and lame. Quick side rant actually, and I haven't made this hidden in my past videos, but I hate social media. I don't know how anyone does it. I'm almost in awe and kind of jealous of people who can utilize social media and not want to defenestrate after they take part in all of this ubiquitous bullshit that goes on with social media. It's just the most depressing, dystopic, bizarre shite hole I've ever seen in my life. Social media. My God. I as I've mentioned in past videos, I play fantasy football and it's the one time of the year where I check Twitter or X or fuck yourself, whatever it's called. And I go on there to check football updates. I try to, and I'm talking about American football, not that pussy ass bullshit soccer. I'm talking about real man football. Sorry, Europeans. Go ahead, bring the hate. It's fine. Soccer, really? Come on. I'm glad, by the way, that football is getting more popular in Europe. It's nice to see. I, I don't know how people in their droves get together and watch soccer. It's beyond me. And I played soccer. I love playing soccer. Playing soccer is something altogether different. It's fun. But watching soccer, I'd rather watch golf, honestly. I'd rather watch tennis, especially women's tennis. That's super fun to watch. But anyway, I got on X, okay? And the shit that people post on X and Twitter is just it's mind-numbingly depressing. How people don't defenestrate after 2 seconds of Twitter blows my mind. It's absolutely ridiculous. Just like the self-absorption and the hatred and the aggression and the passive aggression toward other human beings is truly mind-blowing. I don't know how anyone does it. It is crazy to me. So, anyway, that's my quick side rant. I'm not going to go on too long about this because I know you guys didn't tune in for this, but Jesus, social media. Oof. I've never liked it. I tried it. I don't officially dislike anything until I try it. Full stop. And I've tried it. It's awful. I mean, if you enjoy making yourself feel like shit for extended periods of time, by all means, yeah, keep doing it. I think that's exactly why one of the reasons why everyone on this planet is so stressed out because there's too many of us, number one, and number two, everyone's on social media. Everyone's showing off what they are pretending to have and they don't really have. And it seems that most people who watch these videos don't understand that, yeah, they don't really have these material possessions that you covet so much that's making you feel terrible, but you're still choosing to let it make you feel terrible by watching anything on Twitter. Get out of here. I'm tired of it. It's awful. And it's my own fault for getting on there. And yeah, it's my own fault for being a degenerate in the first place and playing fantasy football. But it is the one time of the year that I get on Twitter, and my God, never again. Although I always say that. Once a month, I say, never again. And then 5 seconds later, I'm on there. So I'm part of the problem, just like you are, just like anybody is. It is what it is. So I'm going to get to what I'm here for, and that is this, the Avalanches, since I left you. But first, I'm going to regale you with other things that you don't really care about. I hope you do. I assume most people who watch my channel are into film just as much as they're into music. Because that's really what my channel is. I talk primarily about music, as you know, but I also love film and sports and, you know, stuff. I like stuff. And one of the things I do like is physical media when it comes to movies. And these are some of the newer things that I've picked up. I mean, new. It's an older movie, but it's a new release on 4K. Natural Born Killers. I picked this up recently. 4K release. And I have yet to watch this on 4K, but I wanted to show it anyway. It's loaded with bonus features. The Blu-ray releases on this have always had a ton of bonus features. Oliver Stone, the man who directed this, has never been shy about bonus features and doing commentaries, and his movies are fun to purchase the physical copies of. They're just loaded. And this is a fantastic movie. If you've never seen this, I highly recommend you do that. I've seen this movie many times, have yet to watch it on 4K, but I wanted to show this. I just picked this up. Story by Quentin Tarantino. He didn't write it. He disengaged from that. He wrote a script that was much different than this, and he didn't like the movie. One of the few movies he didn't like. I love Tarantino, don't get me wrong, but it seems like he loves every single movie that comes out. Sometimes I look at his favorite movies and I'm like, really? That movie was awful. But he just loves film. But he hated this because Stone significantly changed the subject matter to fit his own vision. You know, whatever. We all know who Oliver Stone is. He had some things to say. This is a great movie nonetheless. Natural Born Killers. Watch that. And watch it again if you haven't seen it. Here's a newer Criterion release. I picked this up. If you grew up in the 80s and you had HBO like I did, you've probably seen this 100 times. I love this movie. Is it kind of fluffy a little bit, but it does have some real intensity to it. And there's some fantastic acting in this movie, chiefly from this man right here, Esai Morales. This dude is a serious actor, and I wanted to say that. Lou Diamond Phillips is fine, but this is the real reason to watch this movie, this guy right here. He was also in a movie in the early 80s with Sean Penn called Bad Boys. Forget the Martin Lawrence, Will Smith horse shit, okay? Many years before that, there was another Bad Boys movie that starred Esai Morales, and he played the main villain in the movie, and he's freaky. It's one of those performances where if you had to compile a list of your scariest thug, villain characters in a movie in history, I'd put him in the list. He's really scary in that movie, and it's a scary movie. A frightening, violent depiction of the future of our country. And it's timeless in that way. I highly recommend you watch Bad Boys and La Bamba. La Bamba is a very good movie. It's fun and it's intense and it's well done. It's made in a way that a lot of different audiences can appreciate it, and it looks good. I've watched this. It's a Blu-ray, not 4K, but I like it. It's one of those movies that I will always appreciate. This is just one of those random movies that I think is really underappreciated. After Dark, My Sweet. This is a cool movie. Sorry for the glare. I'm trying to find a good spot here. I haven't broken the seal on this yet. I haven't watched it. But this is a very underrated little gem. Jason Patrick, Rachel Ward, the insanely hot Rachel Ward of the 80s, and Bruce Dern. We know who Bruce Dern is. Check this movie out if you've never seen this. It's really good. Blu-ray, not 4K. Doesn't matter. I have yet to crack the seal on this, but I look forward to it because this is a fantastic movie. Just pick this up. After Dark, My Sweet. Very intense, very noirish, and very overlooked. After Dark, My Sweet. Oh, directed by James Foley, by the way. This is the movie that he did right before one of my all-time favorite movies, Glengarry Glen Ross. And I know you've seen that. If you haven't seen Glengarry Glen Ross, really? Wow. Come on. I mean, one of the great movies of all time. This is the movie he did right before that. Check that out. All right. Oh, here's a fantastic movie. Nil by Mouth. Now, we all know Gary Oldman is one of the greatest actors that's ever walked this earth. Did you know he's a director too? Did you know that? He directed this. Not only is he an amazing actor, he's also a damn good director. If you've never seen Nil by Mouth, what are you doing? This is a great fucking movie. Ray Winstone, you know him. The Sexy Beast Extraordinaire. Amazing film. Check this out. Again, Gary Oldman, I think that especially the older he gets, and I haven't opened this, as you can see, I've seen the movie many times. I need to check out the Blu-ray, and I look forward to doing that. If if you think Gary Oldman is the actor extraordinaire that he is, and you thought he was an immense talent just by that alone, check out his directing abilities here. Multi-talented, insanely multi-talented Gary Oldman. Nil by Mouth, yes, check that out. Here's one of my all-time favorite weird, odd, bizarre, whatever movies. Videodrome. And no, I haven't opened any of these. These are all pretty new. I just picked the bulk of these up in the last few weeks, so I haven't opened these yet. I've seen Videodrome many times. In fact, I have this on Blu-ray, but I double dipped here because I love this movie and it's on 4K, and Criterion does a fantastic job with all of their releases. And this is just a phenomenal movie. David Cronenberg, one of his best. In fact, other than God, you know, I'm ranking the Cronenberg movies in my head. I mean, Jesus, wow, that's a tough one. Maybe I shouldn't even think about that. Other than Naked Lunch and Spider, which is amazing. By the way, why has that not even been released on Blu-ray? What? Where's Spider? Come on. Other than those two, and maybe God, The Fly is amazing. It's Cronenberg. This is right up there. It would be in his top 5 for me. It's loaded with bonus features, and this has a great bonus feature on it where Cronenberg and John Carpenter and John Landis are all talking. It's a panel discussion about horror movies, and it came out in the early 80s. And Landis had just done American Werewolf in London, and Carpenter was on the verge of releasing The Thing. It hadn't come out yet. His most recent movie was The Fog. So that's when that roundtable discussion takes place at a very fertile time for horror movies, the early 80s. And it's a fantastic discussion. And all 3 directors have a lot to say. John Landis obviously is very lively. That's how he is. But it's interesting. I mean, for me, 2 of the greatest horror movies of all time are American Werewolf in London and The Thing. And to have them both there within a year of those movies releasing, and then have Cronenberg just putting this out, it's a good time for that discussion to take place. I recommend you pick this up. And I just got this yesterday. Freaks, Criterion Collection. This is Blu-ray only, no 4K. Freaks, that's not necessarily a movie you even want to see in 4K. Or even necessary. It's a black and white thing. Those of you who don't know Freaks, I highly recommend you investigate this. This is well, it's just a movie that wouldn't get made in these times. You know, it's a movie from another era, another time, another century. It's an interesting look back in the Wayback Machine to see what general audiences were watching. This movie will probably deeply disturb a lot of people. It is disturbing, but back then it was just, it was daytime family cinema. I think there's a lot to be learned about that. You know, the public wasn't protected. They weren't treated like special little snowflakes back then like they are now. So it's just a different time. I'm not saying one I'm not saying one way is any better than the other. But I'm just saying that people are very protected now. You're not really allowed so much to have such random free thought now. Back in these times, it was more encouraged. I mean, there are different ways that they tried to suppress freedom then. but it's not like it is now. So I recommend watching this movie for many different reasons, not just for that reason. It's an interesting look back to our history. All right, those are my recent movie pickups. I haven't really been buying a lot of records. That's why I hold those movies up. Most of the money I've been spending on physical media has been movies. It has not been records. There just haven't been a lot of records I've been buying, and I know I always talk about Apple Music to death. I swear to God, I have no stake in Apple Music. I am not trying to promote them, but I do love this product. I've always had this regime every day. I scour the internet for new records, and I just, in the past, I've always bought what I wanted. But what's become a new thing for me, what's been part of my regime now, um, part of my whole protocol now, is checking to see if these records are on Apple Music. And 95% of the time they are, and they sound fantastic. So I'm finding less and less reason to buy records, because I have enough and they're expensive and I don't really want any more records. I've got enough. So if I can just, you know, if I can pay $12 a month to have some cloud service and have them stored in the cloud and access them whenever I want in high res quality, then hell yeah, I'll do that. And I've been doing that. So, all right. This is one of my favorite sample albums. I've been listening to it a lot. I wrote a piece for Discogs, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago about my favorite sample albums. I basically wrote a top 10 list. And I included things like Meat Beat Manifesto was in there, and Luke Vibert was in there, and Ice Cube. I think A Tribe Called Quest was in there. You got to have some hip hop in there if you love sample music. You have to have some techno and house. But this was my favorite. And the reason that Since I Left You is my favorite is it reminds me of an old school like mixtape. Samples now, it's so hard to clear everything, and it just seems it's much more difficult to make a legit sample album. Everything needs to be cleared. Only the artists that are huge that have the money to pay off clearances can have samples now. And the popular artists that have all the money are boring. I mean, that's why they're popular. That's a different discussion, but the big names that get into our top 10, it's not based on artistry, it's not based on creativity, it's not based on imagination. It's just based on how much can we promote you, how much money can we spend on the producer, how much money do we give the original artist that we're going to sample from. It's just been, like anything, all of the artistry and interest has been bled out of it. And to me, this is the last great, truly great creative sample album. And some samples had to get removed from this, but for the most part, it stands intact. This is an Australian group. I'm not even going to try to announce or say all of the names in this group. There was a whole tribe of people that were in this band when this album came out. But these guys are Australians, and that's part of it too. When I first heard this, it just sounded different. It didn't sound like the standard American shit. It didn't sound like the standard British shit. It just like came out of nowhere. To me, it makes sense that this comes from Australia. I'm not trying to say that Australia is in the middle of nowhere, but how often do you hear music like this coming from Australia? I mean, you don't really hear it that often. And I think that's what makes it unique. It just came from a very different perspective back then. And this reminds me of the old school mixtape days. You just like when you hear mixes now, it's all hip hop, or it's all house, or it's all techno, or it's all electro, or it's all ambient. And that's cool in the right setting, but like true mixtapes, you put it all in there, man. You throw in the kitchen sink. Soul and techno and hip hop and ambient and classical and pop and whatever's striking your fancy, as long as you make it flow and sound good and make it sound like it should be there, that is the quality of any great mixtape. And that is exactly what this album is. It is a love letter to music. more than any other sample album I've ever heard. This is a beautiful record. It makes me feel good every time I hear it. And it makes me feel melancholy. It makes me feel a little sad. It's everything. All the things you want as a human being, it's all represented here. This is a beautiful piece of work. I can't recommend this album enough. I'm sure most people who are tuning into this video have already heard this a million times. Go listen to it again. If you haven't heard this, man, take the time to listen to this album. It is a masterfully crafted piece of art, and I will forever love this album. I first heard of this album, and I'm holding up, this is the 20th anniversary edition, by the way. This is like a 4-album set. There's many different versions of this that came out, and I have 3 different versions of this. I have the original UK pressing. I've never seen a copy of the original Australian press. I would imagine you'd have to go to Australia to find those. I have the original UK press, and then I have a version that came out. I think it was Turntable Lab put out a version a couple years ago. It's on different colored, like peach yellowish colored wax. But this is my favorite, just because it kind of it compiles all the B-sides and remixes here. It's a 4-album set. It's a good pressing. If you like this album, I would recommend you pick this one up. Big thick gatefold, you see that? It's like a quad fold. So yeah, it's an amazing album. And this is the most comprehensive set. It's got all the mixes and the B-sides and whatever you want. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. And quite frankly, the remixes weren't all that. I never was impressed with any, really, of the remixes. And there's some impressive remixers on here. I mean, you get Carl Craig is on here. His remix is all right. You know, God, who else is it? Was Cornelius on? I think Cornelius. Yeah, Cornelius. Mario Caldado, let's see, Stereolab, that's right, Prince Paul, Harvey, let's see, there's Carl Craig, Paperclip people. I mean, you know, you get some big names remixing here, and they're valiant efforts, but nothing ever even comes close to trumping the original versions here. It's just an amazing record. I first learned of this album. There was a time before this album was hugely popular. I remember reading a review about this album in the glorious magazine called Jockey Slut. Do any of you remember Jockey Slut? What a wonderful magazine that was. If you liked electronic music, Jockey Slut was your Bible. Jockey Slut, to this day, in my opinion, is the greatest music magazine that has ever graced this earth. And they're back too in some way. They're not called Jockey Slut. They're called, I think it's called Disco Pogo or something. That was their tagline. Jockey Slut, Disco Pogo for punks and pumps. And so I think they call it Disco Pogo now. But anyway, it was called Jockey Slut back then. It was fucking awesome. Anything electronic, it was there. Underground, popular, it didn't matter. They weren't interested in how popular it was. They just, if it was interesting music, they put it in there. And mainly electronic. Pretty much all electronic. This was their album of the month. Back in, I don't know, 2001? Because this album came out, listen, don't attack me if I get a date wrong, all right? I don't know exact dates every time, but I think this came out in Australia in 2000, right? And then it didn't get released to the rest of the world until 2001. That's the way I remember it. Anyway, Jockey Slut reviewed this in 2001 and gave it their album of the month. And every single month I bought whatever their album of the month was. I didn't care what it was. I didn't care if I'd ever heard of it. I trusted Jockey Slut that much. And they gave this album of the month, so I bought it. And man, I've never regretted it. They usually got their albums of the month right on the money, and they nailed it that month too. So yeah, I've had this album for, in my life for 22 years now. Just absolutely beautiful stuff. Just sampling culture at its best. It's so inventive and funky and interesting and melodic and happy and sad and everything. It runs the gamut of emotions. Perfectly woven. I don't know how long it took these guys to put this together, but it was just it's a beautiful piece of history. And it never ages. Most of the songs it samples are old songs. It just kind of updated. It's hard. It's one of those albums. It's hard to tell what's a sample and what's not. What's a beat that they actually came up with themselves and what's not. I mean, the whole album is like that. It's like, what is that? What's that from? What's that from? I think I've heard that song. Oh, I know I've heard that song. I've never heard that. Is that a sample? I don't know. And then years later, you hear the original source material and you're like, oh, okay, that was a sample, but you didn't know it at the time. You just heard this great song. And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, you're like, oh, God, there's that song I heard on the Avalanches album. It's just so much to discover here. And that's what I love about sampling. I don't want to know what the sources are. I want it to be kind of a mystery. But then you hear songs that you know, like at the end, there's a Donnie and Marie sample, and I knew that song at the time. I'm like, oh my God, there's Donnie and Marie. I mean, it's just all over the place, and it's just a hard album to pin down, and those are always my favorites. Like what is happening here? Here's the gatefold. Some you get some intense text there, right? You get a lot to read, and this is something you have to lay down on a flat surface. So this isn't. I'm not going to do it much justice, but you open up. It's a quad fold, like I said. So you open it up again, and there's that. Some really sweet artwork going on here. I can't open it all the way up. It has to be laying flat. Here's the other side of the quad fold. There's that. If I were to expand this out of the way, you'd see 4 panels here. Check that out. Really nice presentation here. Each record, all 4 records here, have its own printed inner sleeve. So yeah, really nice stuff here. Side 1 and 2. I'll show you. I'll show you all the inner sleeve. Don't you worry about it. There's that. And um, the pressing's pretty good. I have to say my original UK pressing sounds, I don't know, to my ears it sounds a little bit better. And they're also different samples. They changed up the samples a little bit, and I don't know that I've ever even heard the Australian version of it before. But I understand there's even more. There's other samples on that version that they had to remove. So I've heard different versions of this album, and I've heard like 3 different, slightly different versions. Samples are removed, or some of the samples are just different. It sounds different. It's the same song, but it's different. I'm sure somebody out there knows the details to this, but yeah, I've heard like slightly different versions of this album, at least 3. How many are there? Does anybody know? Here is the last disc. I'm not gonna show all the labels here. You guys don't need to see labels, but yeah, nice lush inner sleeves to every record you get here. And you know what? This was reasonably priced. I think when I bought this, it was like, I don't know, it was $45 or something. Which, at the end of the day, I don't think that's a bad price for a 4 album set that's filled with all this extra stuff, and you get the nice quad fold, and the pressing is pretty decent. Shit, you can spend $35 on a double album these days on with cheap ass paper inners, and there are plenty of labels that just stroke you. Um, you can pay upward of $40 for a double album these days, and it's not even a great press. This is a pretty good buy, in my opinion, especially if you love this album. Definitely pick this up. But yeah, in the pantheon of sample culture and sample albums, this is my favorite. And I hope I explained why. I love the mixtape feel. It's got a very retro sound to it. And as someone who was a kid and grew up in the 80s, this album makes a lot of sense. And it's cool to see this album only gain popularity. Because when it first came out, the first couple of years it came out, I don't remember it being such a huge hit. It definitely took some time for people to understand what a special album this was. And then the Avalanches. How long did they take to that next album? I mean, what was it? It's close to, what was it, 15, 20 years? I don't know. It was a long time. I definitely wasn't that impressed. I haven't been impressed really with anything the Avalanches have done other than this. This is just one of those lightning in a bottle moments, especially with sampling. It's just tough to sample now. Clearances and money, and a lot of people, that's how they make their living. They just let people sample them. I mean, listen to, just go watch something on TV. Everything is sample, everything's rehashed, everything is recycled now. Every song you hear on TV now, it's some older song. Younger people wouldn't know the difference. But every time you hear a song in a commercial or something, it's some old song, but some new person sings it. But that costs a lot of money. The original songwriter of that song is making a shitload of money. But it just is what it is now. Songwriting is, in a way, it's sort of a thing of the past. It's an art that is gone. We don't have a lot of real classic songwriters left. It's just that our culture has become this recycled, rehash nonsense. So it's tough. My point is, it's tough to take that kind of vibe and make it creative, make it interesting. That's what the Avalanches did here. This is one of the rare instances where recycling music absolutely makes sense. It's done in a very creative, fun, imaginative way. Since I Left You, the Avalanches. Check this out. Beautiful album. It's so fun. Not a bad moment on here. Some really inspired shit. These are guys that love music. The best love letter to music I've ever heard in my life. Since I Left You, the Avalanches. All right. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.